Hello, welcome back to Steins Gate Zero, Part 6. Well, now we're at the Christmas party, that's nice and all, but sadly, there's a little problem that's going on right now. So, if you use the auto save, the auto quick save feature right here, right? So, config. Auto quick save, scene trigger all. If you use all, it won't keep your saves the next time you load in. So either turn it off or try changing it to one of these. Yeah, okay. I have to use the regular save feature. I think it's just too many quick saves and it kind of overflows it. The sight of so many girls in a small room like this, all wearing Santa miniskirts, threatened to overwhelm me. I was having trouble deciding where to look when Lukaku staggered in front of me. What are you wearing, man? I didn't expect a Santa in black. And wasn't he exposing an awful lot of skin? It was really erotic. But he's a guy. Yeah.
ルカ子なんていうか
Good to see you again, Lukaku. It must have been hard being the only guy. I gave him a pat on the shoulder and he smiled, relieved. The biggest goal today was to get Suzuha to participate. It was no exaggeration to say that's why I told them earlier that I was bringing Dr. Luskin and Maho. I brought the two of them inside.
Merry Christmas!
Yeah.
ありがとう、キュートなお嬢さん。
でも、お父さんの方が大きい。
それともう一人、ヒヤ城真帆さんだ。
どうも、はじめまして。おお、あら。また会ったにゃ。あら、にゃんにゃんの人。小学生？中学生？これでも成人しているのよ。ごめんなさい。
Wow, the smile froze on her face.
なぎりちゃん、どう思う？二人とも逸材だよ。まゆしーは妄想がはかどります。なえちゃんの分も含めて小さめのサイズを用意しておけばよかった。まゆしー、一生の不覚だよ。そのリトルサンタコンビは見たかったな。だよね。
Mayuri had her in her sights then. There was no escape for Maho now. Mayuri was so stubborn, she'd even managed to convince the legendarily shy Lukaku.
先生の方は、あの身長に合うコスは作ったことないよ。存在だけですでに勝ちだけどね。もふもふトナカイさんの着ぐるみを着てもらいたいかも。赤鼻もつけて。それはどうかな。
Wait, were they seriously going to dress the professor up as a reindeer?
マユリ。コスプレ趣味を理解してくれるとは思わない方がいいぞ。
そうだね。
It's so cute though.
妊娠するのは良くないよね。
It's so cute seeing her like this.
コンビニなんかでもクリスマスには店員さんがサンタさんの格好をしていますよ。コミマとクリスマスだと性質はだいぶ違いますよね。
Or so you say, but basically you want to dress the two of them up in Santa outfits, don't
と
you?
いうわけで真帆さん、サンタ服よかったらマユ
Man.
シーのを貸しましょうか。
But when Mayuri says this, how can you say no? Mayuri was already going after her. Maho refused as forcefully as she could, but Dr. Leskin was surprisingly interested. He had been trying to put on a triangular paper party hat.
タルくんから連絡来たよ。もうすぐ作ってすずさんと一緒。
Mayuri was looking at her smartphone. It looked like Daru had pulled it off. I guess he really was Suzu's dad. This meant we'd succeeded in our biggest objective, which meant it was on to the next mission. We'd all decided that we were going to surprise Suzuha. Suzuha didn't know that we were all waiting for her. We each grabbed a noisemaker and got into position. Dr. Leskinen and Maho helped too. Maho seemed unsure, but Dr. Leskinen was more than willing to participate.
電気を消すにゃ。すずさん、喜んでくれるかな。すずはさんのびっくりした顔なんてなかなか見られないもんね。でも実はとっても甘いもの好きなのにゃ。それにとても親切なんですよ。この前、挨拶したら返してくれたよ。へえ、私ももっとすずはさんと仲良くできたらいいな。なれるよ。きっと大丈夫。相性はぴったりだよ。
And then we heard Daru's voice from outside the window in the alley below the building. His voice was loud and unnaturally expository. Once he got below the lab, he was supposed to give a signal. Everything was going as planned. We all went shh at each other in the darkness. I could hear 2 sets of footsteps coming up the stairs. Everyone held their breath and waited. The timing was critical. But would she be able to figure it out before we acted? The room was filled with different smells, like the girl's perfume and the aroma of the food they'd made. Didn't Suzuha always notice these things more quickly than an ordinary person would? I started to get worried. And then I heard the sound of the front door opening.
あれ、今日は誰も来てないんだね。
そういう日もあるよ。
Dara, you idiot, your voice is shaking. I got even more nervous. Was it time yet? Where was the signal? I felt like my hands were going to slip and trigger the noisemaker too early. My palms were soaked with sweat. I could tell Suzuha was taking off her shoes. Ferris gave the signal. The second the lights went on, we all activated our noisemakers. I could see Suzuha flinch for just an instant. But I couldn't follow what happened after that. That's how fast she was. She dropped down, sprung off the floor, and leapt towards Yuki, who happened to be standing in front of her. She might have broken Yuki's jaw with the base of her palm before I could shout at her to stop. No, it's okay. Fortunately, Yuki had been surprised by Suzuha's sudden charge and had slipped when she tried to step back. Because of this, Suzuha's palm barely missed Yuki's nose as it sliced through the air. By the time I finally shouted, it was all over. Suzuha grabbed Yuki before she fell down and was holding her up. Yuki, Suzuha, and all the rest of us were too stunned to speak. That was close. If the timing of events had been slightly different, Yuki could have been badly hurt. Everyone finally realized what had happened and began to panic. Yuki simply lay in Suzuha's arms, blinking her eyes. Suzuha seemed to snap back to reality. She was looking around at everyone. Suzuha was looking around the room. Did she still not understand what was going on? Did she not realize it was a party, since she'd never been to one before? The walls and ceiling were covered in wreaths and ribbons. There was a folding table filled with food, cakes, snacks, and drinks.
ごめんなさい。びっくりさせようって言い出したの私なんです。
Yuki backed away from Suzuha and started to bow apologetically.
すずはこれはなんつうかサプライズってやつを演出してみたわけで、みんな決して悪気があったりとかじゃなくって。すずは
どうぞ。兄さんも知ってたの？
うん。
そっか。だから今日はなんか変だったんだ。ごめんね、すずさん。企画したのはマユシーなんだよ。だからユキさんやダルくんを怒らないで。おごるならマユシーにして。やだな、マユ姉さん。私そんなにいつも怒ってる
Suzuha looked around the room again.
すごいね。いつものラボとは思えないや。でしょ、みんなで飾り付けしたんだよ。うん、本当にすごい綺麗だ。
Suzuha laughed half-heartedly and began backing toward the door.
どこ行くの？どこって、マユ姉さんたちパーティーするんでしょ？邪魔しちゃ悪いからさ。もう兄さんってば気が利かないよな。こんなところに私がいても仕方ないじゃないか。そんなことないにゃん。一緒にやろうにゃ、パーティー。でも私こういうのしたことないし。楽しくご飯食べたりおしゃべりしたりするだけだよ。だからね。
Mayuri grabbed Suzuha's hand tightly to keep her from getting away.
マユ姉さん？
ほら、すずはの席もちゃんと用意できてるのだぜ。
けど本当にどうしたらいいのか私。い
いから座れっつーの。
すずさん。
Mayuri half dragged Suzuha over to the seat next to me and forced her to sit down.
はいはい、皆さん、これで全員揃ったにゃ。はい、拍手拍手。
Everybody started to applaud at Fubuki's signal. Dara played some Christmas carols on the computer. The grim atmosphere that had begun to fill the room was banished. I felt a little relieved.
それじゃあまず乾杯をするにゃ。グラスに好きな飲み物を注いでにゃ。
Everybody started to look at the various drinks on the table.
ほら、すずは。
Suzuha still looked like she was feeling as though she didn't belong, so I poured her some non-alcoholic champagne.
やっぱり私無理だよ、こういうの。
なんで？
だって遊ぶためにこの時代へ来たわけじゃない。
The reason she came to this era, huh? I didn't have the right to say anything about that. I was the only reason that she was stuck here, unable to fulfill her task. But even so...
たまにはいいじゃないか。
でも
すずはは考えすぎだっつーの。
Dara joined the
みん
conversation.
なとご飯食べるだけだって。どのみちお腹は空いてるっしょ。
それは。
Maybe Dara's statement caused her to realize it because her stomach rumbled.
ほれ見ろ。みんながいろいろ作ってくれたんだから、ありがたくいただけばいいんだって。
みんな飲み物の用意はいいかにゃ。それでは今回のパーティーを企画したマユシー、一言どうぞにゃ。
Mayuri stood up, flustered. As she stood, she bumped into Lukaka, who was standing next to her. The two of them almost spilled their drinks.
ルカ君、ごめんね。マユリちゃん、落ち着いて。
Mayuri started to take deep breaths.
今日はクリスマスイブなのです。どこもリア充さんでいっぱいだけど、今年はマユシーたちもパーティーをしてリア充さんになろう。リア充の意味が違うと思うな、マユシー。
Fubuki whispered, a little sad.
ふぶきちゃん、何人もの後輩ちゃんから ナスデートに誘われたのよね。それはもう熱烈に。
全員女の子の後輩だけどね。
とにかくみんなが楽しんでくれればマユシーは嬉しいな。終わりです。
Mary gave a little bow and smiled to Suzuha. Suzuha answered with an expression that wasn't quite a smile.
それじゃあ乾杯するにゃ。マホにゃん、温度よろしくにゃ。
え？私？
せっかく来てくれたんやから自己紹介も兼ねてよろしくにゃ。
Maho stood up with a slight frown and thought for a moment before she opened her mouth.
今日は皆さんの集まりに招待してくれてありがとう。私とレスキネン教授はアメリカ在住なので、こうして日本でクリスマスを迎えるのは初めてです。こういう友人同士での賑やかなクリスマスもとてもいいものだと。
何か面白いこと言ってにゃ。
はい？
面白いことに
Paris, you're crazy. Oh, she was totally losing it. She was worse than Mayuri had been a moment ago. It was hard to believe I'd seen her interpreting in front of that huge crowd at ATF. Was she bad at ad-libbing? Oh. Oh. What? He's okay. Maho's desperate attempt at something interesting was cute, but honestly a little embarrassing. It felt like watching a small, adorable animal.
猫耳メイドの素質があるにゃ。マホリンニャンニャン誕生の瞬間だね。
Paris and Mayuri were the only ones who seemed really impressed.
何を言っているのかしら。
ヒアジョーさん、そろそろ乾杯を。
そうね、そうするわ。それじゃあ乾杯。乾杯。
Everybody happily clinked their glasses together. Since I was the one who invited Maho to the party, I decided to cheer her up.
面白い乾杯の挨拶だったよ。
自己嫌悪だわ。
何を言うんだい。クールなキャットだったじゃないか。
マホニャン、いつからメイクインで働いてくれるにゃ。
そんなつもりはないから。
Paris and Dr. Luskin were both enjoying trying to make her feel better.
すずさん、乾杯だよ。すずさん、私も。あ、
Suza still had a somber look on her face, but Mayuri, Yuki, and Daru forced her into a toast.
はい、すずさん。これ、マユシーが作ったんだよ。
Mayuri put a piece of quiche on a plate and gave it to Suzuha. When Suzuha took a bite, her expression began to shine.
本当？もっと食べて。どんどん食べて。
そんな一度に食べられないよ。
Next, Mayuri offered the quiche to Maho and the professor.
マホさんとレスキネンさんもどうぞ。
ありがとう。
美味しい。これは美味しいですね。
じゃあこちらもどうぞ。エビグラタンとあとフライドチキンはエスニック風にしてみました。
Excellent。
凝っているんですね。
Yuki went around and offered everyone something to eat, but she couldn't bring herself to offer any to Suzuha. Mayuri kept motioning for her to go over, but Yuki just kept fidgeting. Maybe she was thinking about it too much, but Suzuha kept devouring all the food that Mayuri and Yuki had prepared and gushing over each dish. The two of them had been practicing their cooking for about a month here in the lab. I guess it paid off.
ケーキもあるよ。楓さんがデコレーションしてくれたんだ。あんまり上手にできなかったけど許してね。楓さんって不吉祥さんだもんね。でもそんな楓さんが萌えだよ。ちっとも褒められてる気がしないわ。
Everyone laughed. Then, about an hour after we started eating, when she saw that everyone had eaten enough food, Paris clapped her hands together oddly to draw everyone's attention.
さてさて、皆さん盛り上がっ
し間に合わせのものしか用意できなかったけど。
Milo and the professor had stopped at a donkey zode on their way from Wako City and spent just 10 minutes picking out presents.
大丈夫、それでバッチリだにゃ。私持ってきてない。
鈴葉の分は僕とマユシで準備してきたお。
マユシーが選びました。そうなんだ。ごめん。
気にしなくていいのだぜ。
いいのだぜ。
Mayuri mimicked Dar's words as she pulled out 2 small wrapped parcels from her bag and put them on the table. They both had the same wrapping as the one Daru was holding. They must have bought them at the same place. Mayuri had already explained to me Operation Number 2. Mayuri's plan for the evening was not only to make Suzuha smile, but to bring Yuki and Daru a little closer together.
プレゼント交換の方法なんだけど、いろいろ考えて結局くじ引きにしたにゃ。
Ferris gathered together everyone's presents and put little stickers with numbers on them.
にゃんにゃにゃ
And then she lifted a bundle of disposable chopsticks up above her head.
これはマユシーが今夜王様ゲームをやろうとして持ってきたものだにゃ。ああ、言わないでよメリスちゃん。
おいマユリ、王様ゲームっていうのは合コンの時とかにするもんだぞ。
分かってるよ。ちょっと勘違いしただけだもん。
女の子から命令されるのって僕は大好物だけどね。
橋田さん本当に変態さんですね。
ということで、マユシーがちょっと勘違いしちゃったこの割り箸をくじ引き用に使わせてもらうにゃ。引いた番号のプレゼントをゲットできるのにゃ。
Ferris loudly shuffled all the chopsticks and then went around to everyone so they could draw one. She was also part of Mayuri's plan. In fact, Mayuri and Ferris were sending signals to each other with eye contact and with their fingers. While everyone was focusing on the chopsticks, they were busy relabeling Yuki and Dara's presents. They were so obvious about it that I started getting nervous that Yuki would find out.
みんな聞いたかにゃ。それじゃあプレゼントを渡すにゃ。中身を見るのはみんなに行き渡ってからにゃぞ。
ワクワクしますね。
何が当たるかな。
Ferris and Mayuri passed out the presents according to the numbers that everyone drew. Once the presents were handed out, everyone started to take off the wrapping paper. May was the first to react as she gave out a very strange cry. Inside her box was a skull face.
あ、それかっこいいでしょ。ベルトのバックルだよ、ナエちゃん。学校につけていったらきっと人気者だと思うな。
ありがとう。
Fukako, you terrified her. I was feeling bad for Nay, but when I took out my own present...
誰だこれは。
The box had a cute design, and inside it was what looked like a see-through white veil. The veil was decorated here and there with little pink ribbons. This can't be a...
ん？ああ、オカリンさんのところへ行ったか。そのままマユシーにプレゼントしてあげるといいよ。
そんなことできるか。
オカリンさんのためなら喜んできてくれるって。
どうしてそういう話になるんだ。
なになに？マユシーがどうかしたの？
Mayuri heard her own name and came over.
それって何かな？ベビードールだよ、マユシー。しかも超可愛くてセクシーなやつ。オカリンさん。
そんなわけにはいかないだろう。
それならオカリンさんが自分で来てもいいんですよ。
これは返す。いくらでも自分で楽しんでくれ。
I pushed the baby doll lingerie back into Fubuki's hands.
じゃあこっちと交換します？
Fubuki handed me her present in exchange. The wrapping and lid had already been removed. I took a quick look inside. Sexy pink shorts and a pink bra. Yep, they were see-through.
それ私が持ってきたプレゼントです。まゆりちゃんに着てもらえるなら嬉しいです。どうぞ。
君たちにはそういう発想しかないのか。
マユシーはもうオカリンからプレゼントもらった
Mayuri had drawn my present, perhaps because we were childhood friends. By the way, I'd chosen a huge chunk of chocolate in the shape of a gold bar, the kind of thing you find in a Donkito bargain bin.
オカリンさんさ、もうちょっとなんかなかったの？
うるさいな。パーティーではこういうのがウケるって雑誌に書いてあったんだ。
いや、これはないわ。うん。
ないわね。
なんだって。
Not even a chance. The magazine said it was a sure thing.
マユシーは嬉しいよ。だって金の延べ棒だよ。こんなの一生触れないよ。いい子だ、マユシーは。本当にいい子ね。よしよし。
Fubuki and Kai were patting Mayuri's head, half out of sympathy and half because she was cute. Somehow, I ended up as the bad guy.
じゃあ次は私が開けてみますね。
Yuki started to open her present. She took out a cute wooden music box. When she opened the lid, there was a little tin figure that danced.
すごいかわいい。素敵ね。ロマンティックです。いいな。
The girls all seemed really impressed. But Lukaku was a guy. It definitely looked like something a woman would enjoy receiving. With as many girls as there were coming to this party, it might have been the perfect choice. Wait, maybe I should have brought something like that. But then I realized that the idea had never even occurred to me.
これ一体誰からのものにゃ。
Ferris, you're making it too obvious.
あ、僕
Dara reluctantly raised his hand.
うわあ、あらまあ、ダルおじさん、すごいね。やるね、兄さん。
Everyone except Mayuri and Ferris, who knew about it in advance, raised their voices in surprise.
これ橋田さんなんですね。
Oh,
どうかな。マユシからアドバイスしてもらって選んだだけなんだけどさ。
素敵。ありがとうございます。大切にしますね。
Yuki held the music box close to her chest. She seemed really happy. And then her expression turned confused as she looked down into the box. Then she started to fidget.
ごめんなさい。私ちょっと。
She hurried off toward the washroom, still holding the box. She must have seen the trick. According to what Mayuri had told me earlier, there was a fake letter from Daru himself taped to the bottom of the box. It was something like a love letter, along with an invitation to a movie date. I wondered how she was reacting. Meanwhile, Daru had also opened his own present, and he looked a little bothered. He'd been given Ferris's present. Until he'd opened it, he looked really happy, but now he'd gone completely silent. According to Mayuri, he was going to get a pair of movie tickets. And even though it was a present from Ferris, the tickets came with instructions to use them for a date with Yuki. Ferris responded to Daru's questioning gaze with a wink. Good luck, yes, he seemed to be saying. For her part, Ferris received some kind of strange doll that Maho had bought at the Donkito. Lukaku's present was a miniature remote-controlled helicopter that Dr. Leskinen had purchased. And Dr. Leskinen got a set of 12 cute little crayons from Nate. Suzuha's present was a pair of handmade gloves. Yuki had evidently made them herself. She put them on looking happy, but maybe a little only.
鈴葉、よかったじゃん。
っていうか、兄さんは何が当たったの？
これ。
Daru realized he'd been set up, and he was clearly avoiding looking at her. Suzuha seemed to understand and patted him on the back with a gentle expression on her face.
いいんじゃない？行ってきなよ。
なんだお鈴葉まで。
だって二人を見てるとじれったいからさ。
けどリアルでデートなんかしたことないし。
母さんもそうらしいよ。
え、そうなん？そっか。
Yuki came back from the bathroom. She seemed to be having trouble walking straight. She sat back in her seat but began to nervously nibble on snacks at the table. And once in a while, she would take a look at Daru. For now, the movie ticket plan seemed to be going well. Staring too much could tip her off. I should probably pretend I didn't know anything.
マユシ シーが用意したオルゴールは真帆さんに言ったんだね。
Oh. Mayuri raised her voice when she saw the music box in Maho's hands. It was shaped like a deformed bear, and when you wound it up, its hands and legs would jerk back and forth as it played with it. It was a very different design than the one Yuki had received.
いいのかしら。こんな素敵なものをいただいてしまって。
いいんですよ。どうぞどうぞ。どんな音聞きたい。そうですね。僕も聞いてみたいです。
Maho started to wind it up. As she wound it, Kai turned off the music in the background.
じゃあ
Maho took her hand off the winding key, and the mechanical, yet gentle sound that was unique to music boxes began to play. The lively atmosphere of the lab was replaced with a feeling of calmness and peace. We listened quietly to the sound of the music box.
まゆしいね。この曲大好きなんだ。僕もです。ポカポカした気持ちになるね。
ええそうね。
あ、そうか。この曲だ。
Suzuha stood up as if she suddenly remembered something.
ゆきさん、ほら、覚えてない？え？はい？
Yuki was spacing out so hard that she started to panic when Suzuha spoke to her.
私が寝込んでた時、ゆきさんがここで歌ってたよね。ああ、そういえば、確かにこの曲だよ。
Suzuha seemed to be remembering something as her eyes narrowed.
ねえ、まゆ姉さん、これなんていう曲？ね、これは。
Mayuri was about to speak, and then... out of nowhere, the world twisted. I moaned in pain as an incredible sense of wrongness flooded through me. The whole lab seemed to twist and fade, and the happy party I'd been experiencing warped and waved like a mirage. It couldn't be. No. Somewhere far away, I heard something that sounded like a violent crash. I was just barely able to move my eyes in the direction it came from, and I saw Fubuki falling to the floor as she knocked over a table. Kaiden Ferris ran over to her, calling her name. But it all looked so blurred, like I was watching a movie underwater, and everything was moving so slow. Their voices were getting further and further away. No matter how much I stretched out my hand, it reached no one and touched nothing. It was a terrible feeling, as if time and space were being torn apart, and even matter itself was losing its subjectivity. This feeling, even if I didn't want to remember it, I knew what this awful feeling was. I knew it far better than I'd ever wanted. This was reading Steiner. For the first time in almost 4 months, I felt like the whole world was twisting. Who was it? Who had changed the world line? I didn't do anything. I had interfered with the world. So why was the world doing this to me? I opened my eyes. Things had already taken on different colors. The world kept wavering until once again it became fixed to a single point in time. I wasn't looking at a warm, cheerful party in the lab anymore. I was outside. It was raining. The rain was falling on my face in drops so large that it hurt. It was a midwinter rain. It was freezing cold, and I could feel it sapping the strength from my body. My view stopped twisting. I was staring at the broad back of a man I didn't know. I could hear the sound of many boots stamping through the mud, mingling with falling rain. The stench was terrible. The smell of sewage was so strong it hurt to breathe, and it was mixed with the awful smell of burning rubber and plastic. Where was I? What was I doing right now? Things around me had changed so much. I tried to understand the situation I was in, but my brain was having an awful time keeping up. When I stopped, a rough hand patted me on the shoulder encouragingly. I looked around to see a man my age, with a strong, powerful face. It was a face I'd never seen. I didn't know him, probably. The man was wearing the camo outfit and equipment I'd often seen the self-defense force wear in the news. He was carrying an assault rifle on his shoulder. There were 7 or 8 people around me, all dressed the same. They surrounded me in a circular formation and walked forward silently, as they kept a careful eye on the area around them.
この人たちは自衛隊員
And then I realized I was wearing the same camo uniform they were.
俺が自衛隊員だって
I touched my bicep to check, but there was no muscle. It was flabby and weak. Unlike the others, I wasn't carrying any weapons. Then what was going on here? It felt like these 7 or 8 tough-looking SDF guys were all guarding me. Since when was I that important? Still confused, I dragged myself onwards. Where was I anyway? It was a long path filled with dark brown mud. The walls formed a tall silhouette to the left and right. The path was filled with garbage and concrete rubble, and sometimes we had to force our way past it. I looked up past the high walls. Despite the rain, the moon in the night sky was strangely red and a little too bright. It was thanks to the moon that we were able to walk down a path like this without flashlights. Sound. I heard a sound. It was the sound of water. I looked over and saw a hole opened in one of the walls. Filthy water was pouring out. The water formed dozens of little rivers that blocked our path. So that was it. This was the bottom of a river that had dried up. What looked like high walls were the river dikes.
ここってどの辺なんです
I turned towards the man who had spoken to me a bit ago and yelled so that my voice could be heard over the rain.
大きな声を出さないで。
すみません
あと少しで都心を抜けます。練馬駐屯地の近くまで行けば車が用意されているはずですから、そこまで。
But his words cut off there. Everyone seemed more tense than ever. One of them grabbed me and pushed me toward the side of the riverbed. Everyone put their backs against the wall and held their breath. I could hear the sound of the helicopter's rotors in the distance. No, more than just one. They were getting closer. I had no idea what was going on, but I could feel my heart start to beat faster.
あの車の陰に入って。
Past several meters of rubble lay an overturned car. It must have fallen into the riverbed after the water had disappeared. The entire body was bent inward, and the roof was completely crushed. I lay down in the stinking mud and slid into the shadow of the overturned car. At the same time, the SDF soldiers were issuing each other orders, as if this was something they planned for already. 2 of them stayed by my side, and everyone else ran back the way to become. They all climbed up crevices and outcroppings on the wall, then disappeared over the edge of the dike and out of my view. Shortly after, those were gunshots, and not just a single shot from a handgun or anything like that. This was the sound of war. I could hear the helicopters get further away, drawn by the gunfire.
なんてことだ
In this world line was Japan at war, the Third World War. I remember Suzua's words. I happened to look inside the crushed car. I could see the corpses of a man, a woman, and a small child hanging upside down, still attached to their seatbelts. They were all covered in dried black blood. They looked like mannequins at a bat-haunted house. And then I realized. I'd been so focused on moving forward that I hadn't noticed what they were, but I'd seen similar mannequins sunk into the mud. I could see their arms, the bones and ragged muscle exposed to the air, reaching up to the sky as if seeking salvation. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. Those were mannequins.
今です。壁に沿って進んで。ルートを変えます。さあ、立ってください。
He pulled me up. My knees were shaking from shock and exhaustion.
仲間がソ連のヘリ部隊を引きつけてますが、それほど持ちません。早く。
それ
My mind was dulled from the terror, but it seemed like there was something off about what he just said.
しっかりしてください。あなたを守るために、すでに何人犠牲になったと思っているんですか。
俺をなぜ
理由は聞かされていません。でも、命を懸けて守れと自分は命じられています。それがこの国の未来につながるのだ。
A helicopter passed over the riverbed. The bright searchlight passed by for a moment, but thankfully, the shadow of the dike hit us.
こっちへ。
The young SDF soldier, whose name I didn't even know, pulled me inside one of the holes in the concrete. When I looked closely, I could see that it was the entrance to a sewer. It was just big enough for a single person to pass through. Struggling against the flow of water that came up to my knees, I pressed on through the darkness. My sense of smell had already gone numb, so I didn't have to worry about the sense of the sewage. Once inside, we came to several branching paths. The SDF soldiers seemed to know which one would lead where, and they marched on without hesitation. And then we came out of the sewer and back into a riverbed. It was dried up, just like the one we'd just been through. I didn't know if it was the same river or another one, and the two soldiers didn't tell me. Either way, I was glad to be finally out of the foul-smelling darkness, and then I tried to take a deep breath and fill my lungs with fresh air. But halfway through, I realized that the riverbed smelled even worse than the sewer. I took an involuntary step back, and then another. The sight in front of me was just that terrible. What was once a riverbed was now filled with bodies. Some of them had been burnt totally black, so it was impossible to tell how much death lay before me. And in the distance, I could see what looked like bonfires. They were burning despite the rain. The fires were consuming the mountains of flesh that once were human bodies.
もうすぐです。きついでしょうが、走れますか？
The SDF soldier spoke to me, and then I came back to my senses. If it weren't for these two, I wouldn't have been able to stay sane. We ran through the riverbed, one of them in front of me, the other behind. I could hear the constant drone of the helicopters above me. Sometimes the searchlights got very close. Each time they did, I hid in the piles of bodies until they passed. I'd seen this many times before as I've wandered through the world lines. I'd seen death. I'd seen the moments when people had died. But at the same time, I'd never experienced what happened to a dead person after they were roughed out for a long time. More than fear, more than sorrow, the thing that hit me first was the smell of death. The rotting stench ate away at my body, not my soul. My whole body was rejecting it. It made me feel sick. Thinking that way meant trampling on the dignity of the dead, but I couldn't help it. The Valley of Hinnom. I remembered that phrase. That was what that strange attacker had said that night when they came after Dr. Leskinen, Maho, and me. That valley was the origin of the word Gehenna, meaning hell. It was said that the flames burned there every night, scorching the heavens themselves. Those who died merciless deaths with anger or misery in their hearts were falling into the flames, their souls becoming black smoke that rained hatred down on the land. What I stared at now was scary. The two soldiers led me to a half-collapsed subway tunnel. The lights were all off because there was no electricity, but there were 3 armored cars in camo colors with their headlights on to illuminate the way. They were 4-wheel drive off-road vehicles covered in thick chunks of armor, but I didn't see any real weapons.
ここから地下鉄内を通って埼玉へ抜けられます。入間基地はまだ無事と聞いています。そこまで行けば関東を脱出できるはずです。
関東脱出？
話は向こうで聞いてください。とにかく急いで。
There were a lot of things I wanted to ask, but even as we spoke, I heard what sounded like gunshots outside the tunnel. The men forced me into the back seat of one of the cars.
それではご無事を祈っております。
え、あなた方も？
自分たちには別の任務がありますので。では。
The 2 soldiers who had brought me here saluted, then turned around and left the station. I felt like I was never going to see them again. The door of the armored car slammed shut with a heavy thud. The car's crew were SDF soldiers, just a little older than me. The diesel engine kicked to life, and the car raced down a tunnel that had originally been designed for trains. Of course, it wasn't a pleasant ride at all, but I didn't have any choice. There was no way I could tell them I wanted to go to Okinawa. I had no way to alter the world line. I had to survive in this hellish world, and to survive, I needed to do what they said. My wants didn't matter at all. I wasn't even allowed to express them. I just did as they told me and ran. It was all I could do, but I had no idea that it would take an entire month. The reason it took a month to get to Okinawa was that we were losing the war. Supposedly, the plan had been to ferry me by plane to Okinawa once I'd arrived at Iruma base, but the constant bombing had slowed us down, so they gave up on the plane and decided I would escape to Kyushu by ground. There was more than one attack by Soviet spies and assault teams. Some of the SDF soldiers protecting me died. But when I got to Sasebo, I was able to get on a maritime SDF escort ship and managed to escape to Okinawa. What were they doing all this time? No matter how many times I asked, no one would answer. Okinawa in winter was covered in thick clouds. Come to think of it, I hadn't seen a real break in the clouds for a whole month. I was thinking about that when I was loaded into a van with dark tinted windows that had come to pick me up from the port. Inside the car was not only the driver, but a middle-aged man sitting in the front passenger seat. He was very short, perhaps only around 150 centimeters tall, but he had the air of a military veteran, and even though he was fully dressed, I could tell he was extremely muscular.
Okabe Rintarou 君だな。私は防衛省中央情報保全隊の下山という。これから空港に寄り道してから彼らの沖縄防衛局へ向かう。長旅で疲れているところ申し訳ないが、もうしばらく我慢してくれ。
はい。
I'd heard that Tokyo had been destroyed. The major functions of the Japanese government were now headquartered out of the Okinawa Defense Bureau to allow for better cooperation with the American forces stationed nearby. That's what Shimoyama explained to me. In other words, the place I was heading to was the core of Japan's defenses. Once I arrived, would I understand why it was so important that all those soldiers were willing to die to protect me? The car stopped in front of Naha Airport for a while, and then I saw a surprising pair get aboard.
岡部さん、本当だ、オカリンさんだ。
君たちはユキさんと中瀬さんじゃないか。
I wasn't expecting to see them there, but they were the first people I knew who I'd met since coming to this world line. That alone was almost enough to make me cry. But still, I couldn't just sit there and be happy.
マユリはマユリの行方を知らないか。
大丈夫です。
Yuki nodded as if trying to make me feel better.
さっきまで一緒だったんです。
一緒だった。
そうなんですよ。マユシーでしょ、ルミホちゃんでしょ、ルカ君、楓ちゃん。
今朝空港に着いて、みんな防衛局というところで保護してもらえるというので待っていたんですが、さっき急に私と吹雪ちゃんだけ先に連れて行くと言われて。
それでこの車に乗せられたらオカリンさんがいたってわけ。
とにかくみんなが無事でよかった。
Since Dara and Suza weren't mentioned, I was going to ask about them,
すまないが、積もる話は後にしてもらっていいだろうか。
Shimoyama cut me off and the car started
沖縄防衛局には君たちのご家族もいずれ到着する予定だ。すでに我々の方で保護はしている。
本当ですか？よかった。
別行動になったお友達の皆さんもすぐ後ろの車に乗っている。離れ離れになるわけではないから安心していい。
I took a quick look and saw another identical van a little behind us. So Mayuri and the others were there.
じゃあ後でまた会えるんですね。
もちろんだ。
Yuki let out a sigh of relief. But then I started to wonder about something else. Why are we split into different cars? This van could hold at least another 3 people. If we squeezed tight, it could easily hold everyone. Or was there some reason they put me, Yuki, and Fubuki into the same car? The car drove alongside the Okinawa monorail for a while, and then went south down a wide bypass.
何です？
いや、こんなに店が並んでるのにどこも真っ暗だから。
There were lots of franchise restaurants, big supermarkets, cafeterias for tourists, and rent-a-car places all jammed together along the side of the road. But all of them were dead silent and their lights were turned off. Barely any of the streetlights were turned on, and the only cars were Japanese and US military vehicles. I didn't see anyone out walking.
10日間制と午後5時以降の外出禁止令が出ているんだ。沖縄なら安全とは言ってもね、戦時下なんだよ。以前のようにはいかない。早く戦争など終わって元に戻ってほしいものだ。
Wartime, huh?
なあ岡部君、君の知っている沖縄は夜遅くまでもっと明るくて楽しい場所だったろ？
あ、どうでしょう。俺は沖縄は初めてなので。
それはもったいないな。なら次は楽しい旅行で来られることを祈っているよ。ここは本当にいい島だ。
The car headed up from the bypass over a land bridge and then to another road. We quickly came to a long tunnel.
実は3人に防衛局に着く前に少しだけ質問をしたくてな。それでこうして同乗してもらった。
My guess was right. That meant there was something he wanted to ask just the three of us. But why us three? I wasn't particularly close to Yuki or Fubuki. I'd only even started talking to them a few months ago, and then I shook my head. That was before the world line changed. Maybe things were different in this world line. I had no idea what my relationship was to anyone else in this world line. Since the SDF had been treating me so well, I didn't want to make Shiminoyama suspicious. I decided it would be best to leave most of the talking to Yuki and Fubuki.
Amane Yuki-san.
Shimoyama spoke to Yuki first. Yuki went stiff when her name was called. I could feel it even sitting next to her.
君は橋田至君とその妹さんがどこにいるか知らないだろうか。
Little sister. That must be Suzuha. That would mean that even in this world line, Suzuha had come from the future and gotten to know Yuki and the others while pretending to be Suzuha's sister. And the SDF evidently didn't know where Dara's sister were. You mean Dara's sister? Pretending to be Dara's sister. Yuki felt silent and glanced over to me as if expecting help. But I didn't know where they were either. I didn't even have any memories of this world line, so I had no way of answering. But Yuki's attitude bothered me. It was as if she knew where they were and was deliberately hiding it, and that I was supposed to be hiding it too. I could figure that out. I'm sure Shimoyama could too. A strange tension filled the car. Yuki was trying to hide it. From whom?
知らないかな?
Shimoyama turned around from the front passenger seat and asked again.
すみません。
Yuki bowed her head in apology.
でも君は橋田君とかなり親しいお付き合いをしているんだよね。恋人に何の連絡もないというのは。
携帯電話なんてもう使い物になってないじゃないですか。
連絡方法なら携帯以外にもいくらでもある。
でも本当に何も。
妹さんからも？
はい。
時に岡部君は橋田君と何か研究をしていたらしいね。
え
？I wasn't sure how to react when the conversation suddenly turned towards me. Researching? Researching what? Uh-oh. If I panic, I'll make them suspicious.
どんな研究をしていたんだね?
I would just have to give them the most harmless answers I could.
研究というより、なんていうか、ちょっとした発明のアイデアというか。
発明？
竹とんぼに CCD カメラをつけて空撮ができないかとか、掃除機の排気をドライヤー代わりにしてみるとか。
ほう、なかなか面白いね。それじゃ何かとんでもないものを作っていて、それを知られないために我々から逃げたというわけではないんだね。
逃げた?
I responded. That was a mistake. But did that mean that Daru and Suzo were hiding from the SDF amidst all this chaos? The SDF had risked their lives to protect me over the past month. Shouldn't I be asking them for help? I got even more confused.
知らないのならいいんだ。橋田君たちのことは保留にしておこう。
Somebody, please tell me what the right answer is. How am I supposed to respond here?
中瀬克美さん、君には別に聞きたいことがあるんだ。
私？
This time it was Fubuki's turn to jump up in
い
her
やいや
seat,
そんなに緊張しなくていい大したことじゃない
or so Shimoyama said, but Fubuki was clearly starting to get scared. Her reaction was strange. It was too strong. Maybe the self-defense forces weren't simply protecting us. For one thing, there was no way normal civilians like us merited such important treatment. But then, what were they after? No, I could guess. The time machine. This war started with Russia's time machine experiments. And of course, Nakabachi was involved. I'd learned from some of the soldiers that even in this world line, he'd sought asylum in Russia. And Suzuha was a time traveler from the year 2036. If Suzuha was here in this era, that meant that it was Daru who made the time machine that brought her here. If you had a time machine, you could change the outcome of this war. It would make sense if that's what the Japanese government thought, and if that was why they were trying to capture Daru, Suzuha, and their friends. Once I realized that, the whole situation started to feel terrifying to me. Was this car really headed toward the Okinawa Defense Bureau? And if it was, were they really going to keep us safe there?
先週中瀬さんに受けてもらった健康診断なんだが
何か悪いところでも見つかったんですか？
いや東京で怪我をした傷も治りかけているし体調には問題はないただストレスがひどいようだねまあ無理もないあれだけひどい空襲をくぐり抜けてきたんだ今やほとんどの民間人に PTSD があると言ってもいいただ君の場合他の人とは少し違うようだ随分とリアルな夢を見たりするとかひどい時には白チュームというのかな現実と夢の区別がつかなくなることもあると聞いた
だからそれが PTSD ってことじゃないんですか？
Fubuki was too scared to speak, so Yuki interrupted. It was weird to see Yuki act like this. If nothing else, I'd never seen it before. It was plain now. Yuki didn't trust Shimoyama. In fact, she considered him an enemy.
いやそれが実に奇妙な話なんだが
Shimoyama paused a moment for effect and rubbed his chin.
中瀬さんと非常によく似た白チュームを見る人たちがいるしかも一人や二人じゃないもちろん程度の差はあるが国内だけでもすでに十数名ほど見つかっているどうやら海外にもいるようだまあ西側諸国の情報しかないがね
そんなのただの偶然じゃ
Fubuki was incredibly frightened, so I spoke in her
風神を
place.
知っているだろ
Suddenly, Shimoyama turned his gaze towards me and asked me a question.
プーシンソ連の書記長ですよね
I almost said the president of Russia, but managed to stop myself. The Soviet Union still existed in this world line. Putin's title was General Secretary, not President. I'd heard that during my time at Iruma.
そうだが中瀬さんは興味深いことにプーチンがロシアの大統領だと答えたとか
What?
すみませんなんか寝ぼけてたんですそれに私勉強とか全然ダメで
いやそうじゃない白チュームを見る人たちの特徴の一つなんだ皆一様にそう口にするプーチン大統領とねゴリバチョフやリリツィンのことも大統領と呼ぶものばかりだそのおかげで研究者たちは陰で大統領病とか呼んでるそうだがセンスのないネーミングだな
No way. Is he talking about reading Steiner? There was a strong chance that people besides me had that power, even if not as acutely. I never found out for sure, but what Ferris had said in the Alpha World line certainly suggested it. So it was certainly possible that Shimoyama's waking dreams were actually the effects of reading Steiner. If they were all aware of the world line shift a moment ago, just like me. If Fubuki had the same memories of the other world line that I had. It would make perfect sense that she called Putin the president.
ゴリバチョフレリツィン
知らないのかね世界史の授業でやっただろ
私高校時代からずっと理系だったもので
常識だと思っていたが今の若い子は知らないのか最近の学生がここまで不勉強とはね岡部君は知っているだろうゴリバチョフやレリツィンくらい
ええまあ
ベルリンの壁の崩壊やペレストロイカ。
はい。それも教科書で。
The second after the words were out of my mouth, an alarm went off in my mind. Something was wrong. There was something strange about what Shimuyama was saying. And then I realized. The East and West were caught up in the middle of a world war. How could the Berlin Wall have fallen? And could Gorbachev really execute perestroika? By the time I realized he tricked me, it was too late. My panic appeared on my face.
君もそうだったのか。そしてそれを恋に隠そうとしたね。やはり情報通りなんだな。君は何か重大なことを知っている。なあ、岡部君、教えてほしいんだが。
Shimuyama suddenly laughed. It was a bitter laugh, almost eerily so.
レリツィ、君たちが口にするそれは一体誰なんだ。我々はもちろんアメリカのあらゆる情報機関にもそんな人物のデータは存在しないんだ。
Okay, doesn't exist. I looked over at Yuki. From the look on her face, I could tell that she really had no idea who they were.
ペレストロイカだの、ベルリンの壁崩壊だの、それは本当にあったことなのか。答えてくれ。
But I couldn't answer. I was thinking of something completely different. I suddenly realized why the world line might have changed a month ago on Christmas Eve. What if Russia used a time machine that day in an experiment to change the past? The goal of the experiment would have been to stop the collapse of the Soviet Union. And if the result of them changing the past was this world line, how foolish. A single change to the past and the butterfly effect makes the entire world so different. Did they know how many people had died?
君や君の友達には本当に他の世界の歴史が見えているのか。私にはとても信じられない。頭のおかしい学者どものたわごとにしか。
He was about to push you further when we heard the sound of an incoming call on a cell phone. Shimuyama grunted and took his phone out of his pocket.
下山だ。ああ、今防衛局へ。何？どういうことだ、それは。くそ。これだからバカどもは。あいつらどこの国の政治家だ。
Shimuyama's finger slammed down on the end call button so hard I thought the phone would break. There was a look of rage on his face.
行き先変更だ。嘉手納基地へ向かえ。第2ゲートだ。
His words were filled with irritation as he spoke to the driver. Changing destinations. Who is he just talking to? As I sat there confused, Shimuyama started to call someone else.
下山だ。行き先を変更する。嘉手納基地の第2ゲート前で落ち合う。
That was all he said before he hung up.
どういうことですか？
状況が変わった。これから岡部君は米軍基地に行ってもらう。そのまま米軍機でアメリカへ行き、なんていう楽しい旅行が待っているかもしれんな。
America.
せめてファーストクラスを準備するよう要求しておくが、期待はしないでほしい。あいつらは我々の言うことなど、飼い犬の吠え声としか思ってない。
なんでアメリカに？
CIA か NSC か知らんが、君の即時引き渡しを求めているそうだ。
だからなぜ？
そんなことはあいつらに直接聞け。
And then he turned back towards the front and fell silent, refusing to answer any of my questions. The car went down the road for a while until we got off at an exit that read South Okinawa.